There is a kind of person you have met at least once in your life, maybe at work, maybe at a family gathering, maybe just passing through a room. You could not explain exactly what it was about them. They were not the loudest. They were not trying to impress anyone, but something about the way they carried themselves made you stop and pay attention, made you want to be near them, made you trust them before they even spoke a word. You probably music called it confidence, or presence, or charisma. But those words are too shallow for what you actually, music, felt. What you sensed was something rarer. It was a person who had built themselves from the inside out, a person whose morning did not begin with the world's noise, but with their own silence, a person who, long before anyone else was watching, was already doing the work. The Stoics had a word for this kind of inner architecture. They called it virtue. Not virtue in the soft, polite sense we use today, but virtue as in the full disciplined expression of what a human being is capable of becoming. And they believed without apology that music, this kind of person is built before the sun rises. You might be thinking right now, music. I am not 25 years old. My mornings are already complicated. My body does not move the way it used to. My responsibilities are real and heavy. And that is exactly why this matters more for you than for anyone else. Because the disciplines we are going to talk about today are not about optimizing your productivity. They are not about becoming some version of a person you see on a screen. They are about something the Stoics understood deeply, that how you begin your day is how you begin your life, that the first hours of the morning are the hours when you are most yourself, music, before the world gets its hands on you. And here is the truth that most people never face. The quality of your inner life, music, determines everything. How people experience you, how you handle loss, how you love, how you music lead, how you age. It all flows from what you do when no one is watching, from what you choose in the quiet hours before the noise begins. These 10 disciplines will not make you younger. They will do something far more valuable. They will make you undeniable. Discipline 1, wake with intention, not urgency. Most people begin their day in a state of reaction. The alarm sounds, and immediately the mind floods with everything that is waiting, everything that is unfinished, everything that could go wrong. Within 60 seconds of waking, the average person has already surrendered their inner calm to the demands of the outside world. The Stoics' music began differently. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, the most powerful man of his era, wrote music in his private journal these words: On waking, ask yourself, does it make any difference to you whether others do their duty or not? Music, it is no concern of yours. He began each morning by drawing a clear boundary between what was his and what was not. Before he spoke to a single advisor, before he read a single report, he oriented himself. You can do the same not with a lengthy ritual, simply with a pause. Before you reach for your phone, before you speak, before you move, sit at the edge of your bed for 60 seconds, music, and ask yourself one question. What do I want today to mean? Not what do I need to do? Not music, what problems must I solve? What do I want this day to mean? That single question is the music difference between a day you lived and a day that happened to you. Discipline 2. Meet your body before you meet the world. Epictetus was a former slave. He lived with physical limitations his entire life, and yet he taught with absolute clarity that the body is the one instrument you have been given to carry your values through the world. To neglect music, it is not humility, it is negligence. This does not mean punishing yourself with extreme exercise. For a person who has lived 40, 50, 60 years, the body requires respect, not punishment. It means movement, deliberate conscious movement. In the first part of your day, a walk, a slow series of stretches, 10 minutes of something that connects your mind to your physical existence. You might be thinking right now, I already have joint pain. I am tired before the day begins. I do not have the energy I once had. That is precisely the point. The discipline is not about what is easy. It is about the message you send to yourself when you choose to move anyway. Music. When you tell your body, I have not abandoned you. I am still here inside you paying attention. That message changes everything about how you carry yourself through the rest of the music day, and people feel it. They cannot explain it, but they feel it. Discipline 3. Feed your mind before you feed your fears. Music. There is a window in the early morning, usually the first 30 to 60 minutes after you wake, when your mind is unusually open. The noise of the day has not yet arrived. Your defenses are down. Your thoughts are soft and receptive. This window is either filled by you or filled by the world. There is no neutral option. Most people fill it immediately with news, with social media, with other people's crises and opinions and anxieties. And by the time they sit down to eat breakfast, they have already consumed a full day's worth of other people's fear. The Stoics were obsessed with what they called the morning reading. Seneca wrote letters to his friend Lucilius, in which he described his habit of beginning each day with a single idea from a great thinker. Not a chapter, not an hour of study, one idea held carefully in the mind, turned over slowly like a stone in the hand. He wrote, "Gather and save the thoughts which may arm and strengthen you against the day which is to come." That word arm is important. Seneca was not reading for entertainment or information. He was reading to prepare himself to build in the morning the kind of mind that would not be swept away by whatever the afternoon music brought. You can do this with a single page from Marcus Aurelius, a paragraph from any serious book, a single passage you have read before but never fully absorbed. The goal is not to consume more. The goal is to think more slowly and more deeply than the world wants you to. Because here is what the Stoics understood about wisdom. It does not come from reading more. It comes from sitting longer with less. The person who has spent 10 minutes genuinely wrestling with one true idea is more prepared for life than the person who has scrolled through 1,000 opinions. Discipline 4. Practice voluntary discomfort. This one will feel strange at first, but stay with it. Music. Seneca practiced what he called voluntary poverty. Once a month, he would live for a few days with the bare minimum. Simple food, no luxuries, reduced comfort. Not because he was punishing himself, but because he wanted to test music himself. He wanted to know with certainty that if everything were taken away, he could still function. He could still think clearly. He could still be himself. He wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?'" For you in your life today, music, this does not require dramatic sacrifice. It might mean taking a cold shower for 60 seconds before a warm one. It might mean skipping the second cup of coffee you do not need. It might mean sitting in silence for 10 minutes when every part of you wants distraction. The point is this: when you voluntarily choose discomfort in small doses, you build something that cannot be faked and cannot be bought. You build the certain knowledge that you are not controlled by comfort. Music, and that knowledge carried quietly inside you changes the way you move through every room you enter. Discipline 5. Write one honest thought. Not a journal in the traditional sense, not a record of what happened yesterday or a list of things you are grateful for, though those things have their place. What the music Stoics practiced was something sharper and more demanding. They called it the examination of conscience, and they did it in writing, because writing forces a kind of honesty that thinking alone rarely achieves. Marcus Aurelius did not write his meditations for anyone to read. He wrote them for himself. Music. He wrote things like, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But he also wrote things that were uncomfortable. Things like how much time he gains who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks. He was correcting himself, holding himself accountable, using the page as a mirror. Music. You might be thinking right now, "I am not a writer. I do not know what to say. I would not know where to begin." Begin with one question. Ask yourself, where did I act from fear yesterday instead of from values? Or ask, what am I pretending not to know? Or simply, what is true right now that I have been avoiding? Write 3 sentences, music. That is enough. The discipline is not the length. The discipline is the honesty. Because the person who can look at themselves clearly in the morning without flinching, without making excuses, without performing even for their own inner audience, that person becomes extraordinarily difficult to music manipulate, extraordinarily difficult to destabilize. The world is full of people who are afraid of their own thoughts. The person who is not afraid stands apart in a way that others immediately sense. Music, even if they cannot name it. Discipline 6. Define what you will not do today. Most people begin their morning with a list of what they intend to accomplish. The Stoics added something most modern planners completely ignore. They define their limits in advance. Epictetus taught that the foundation of all freedom is knowing what is yours to control and what is not. Music. And every morning, a serious Stoic would spend time deliberately identifying where their boundaries lay. Music, not as weakness, as strategy. For you, this might look like this. Before the day begins, decide, music, I will not respond to criticism with defensiveness today. I will not give my best energy to something that does not deserve it. I will not allow someone else's urgency to become my emergency. These are not passive decisions. They are acts of profound self-possession. Because when you define in advance what you will not do, you are no longer reacting to the day, you are authoring it. There is a kind of person who seems immune to provocation, who does not rise to bait, music, who does not crumble under pressure, who can sit in a difficult conversation and remain completely steady. People are drawn to that person. They trust that person. They follow that person. That steadiness is not a personality trait. It is a practice, and it begins before the day begins in the quiet of the morning when you decide with full awareness who you are going to be. Discipline 7. Contemplate the worst, then release it. Music. This discipline sounds dark. In our culture, we are told to think positively, to visualize success, to fill our minds with what we want rather than what we fear. The Stoics thought this was at best music naive, at worst dangerous. They practiced what they called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Every morning, Marcus Aurelius would mentally rehearse the difficulties the day might bring. He would think through the people who might frustrate him, the plans that might fail, the discomforts he might face, not to dwell in fear, but to music strip those things of their power before they arrived. He wrote, "Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, music deceitful, envious, unsocial." Now consider what this practice actually does. When a difficult person arrives in your afternoon, you are not ambushed. When a plan collapses, you are not shattered. Music. When something you counted on disappears, you are not undone, music, because you have already been there in your mind. You have already stood in that moment and found that you could survive it. For a person who has lived 40, 50, 60 years, this practice carries particular weight. Music. You have already lost things. You already know that life does not protect anyone from difficulty. The premeditatio maiorum is not pessimism. It is the honest acknowledgement of reality combined with the deliberate preparation of your inner response. Spend 2 minutes in the morning asking what could go wrong today, music, and who will I be when it does? Then release it. You are not trying to prevent what might happen. You are training the self who will face it. And here's the paradox that the Stoics understood completely. The person who has made peace with difficulty in advance is the most genuinely optimistic person in any room. Because their optimism is not fragile. It does not depend on things going well. It rests music on something far more reliable. It rests on knowing themselves. Discipline 8. Speak to yourself as you would speak to someone you respect. This discipline is the one most people will resist most strongly. Music, because most people, if they could hear the voice inside their own head, would be ashamed of how they speak to themselves. You would never say to a friend, "You are too old for this. You have already missed your chance. Who do you think you are?" And yet these thoughts run quietly through the minds of millions of people every single morning, dressed up as realism, as humility, as practicality. Epictetus was unambiguous about this. He taught that the stories we tell ourselves, music, are not neutral observations. They are instructions. They are commands the mind gives to the body, to the will, to the choices we make, music throughout the day. He said, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. That phrase, first say to yourself what you would be, is not about affirmations in the shallow modern sense. It is about the deliberate choice of identity. Before you walk into the world, decide music who is walking in, not who you wish you were. Not who you were 30 years ago, who you are choosing to be today. Music, given everything you know, everything you have survived, everything you have learned. A person who speaks to themselves with clarity and respect in the morning carries that quality music into every interaction. You can feel it in the way they listen, in the way they disagree without cruelty, in the way they hold their ground without aggression, in the way they make you feel simply by being present. Music that you are in the company of someone who knows exactly who they are. Discipline 9. Sit in silence long enough to hear yourself think. We live in an era that is terrified of silence. Every waiting room has a screen, every commute has a podcast, every meal has a phone beside it. We have built an entire civilization around the avoidance of the one thing the Stoics considered most essential, the uninterrupted encounter with your own mind. Marcus Aurelius called it retreat into yourself. He wrote, men seek retreats for themselves, houses in the country, seashores, and mountains. But this is altogether a mark of the most common sort of men, for it is in thy power whenever thou shalt choose to retire into thyself. Read that again slowly. It is in your power whenever you choose to retire into yourself. He was not describing meditation in the way it is sold today as a technique for relaxation or stress reduction. He was describing something older and more serious, the deliberate act of turning the attention inward, of sitting with yourself long enough to notice what is actually there, what you music actually think, what you actually value, what you actually fear. Most people have not done this in years, possibly music decades. They have been so busy responding to the world that they have lost contact with the person doing the responding. For you, this discipline might look like 10 music minutes of complete silence in the morning. No phone, no music, no background noise. Music just you sitting, breathing, allowing your mind to settle the way sediment settles at the bottom of a glass of water when you stop shaking it. What you will find at first is discomfort. Music. Thoughts will crowd in. Your mind will reach for something to do, something to fix, something to plan. Let it. Watch it. Do not fight it. Simply stay, because what happens after the restlessness passes is something remarkable. A kind of clarity arrives that no amount of information can produce. You begin to hear the difference between your own voice and the voices the world has placed inside you. You begin to feel the difference between what you genuinely think and what you have simply absorbed without examination. And that difference is everything. Music. The person who knows their own mind is extraordinarily rare. In a world of noise, they are recognizable immediately. They do not speak more than others, often they speak less. But when they do speak, something in the room shifts because you can feel that what they are saying is actually theirs. It comes from somewhere real. It has not been borrowed or performed or optimized for approval. That quality is what draws people. Music, not youth, not status, not appearance. The simple, undeniable sense that here is a person who has met themselves and is not running away from what they found. Discipline 10. Do one thing that belongs entirely to you. Every morning before the day becomes about everyone else, before the responsibilities arrive and the requests, music begin, and the world starts making its demands, do one thing that belongs to no one but you. Not something productive. Music, not something that will impress anyone or advance any goal. Something that exists purely because you value it, because it is an expression of who you are beneath all the roles you carry. For one person, this might be 20 minutes of reading a book that has nothing to do with work. For another, it might be sitting with a cup of coffee and watching the light change outside the music window. For another, it might be tending a garden or sketching something, or simply walking a familiar street and paying full attention to what is around them. The Stoics believed that a life lived entirely in service of external obligations, no matter how noble those obligations might be, is a life that slowly hollows a person from the inside. Seneca Music wrote with fierce urgency on this point. He said, Vindici, reclaim yourself for yourself. That small act in the morning, the one thing that is entirely yours, is not self-indulgence. It is the maintenance of the self that makes everything else possible. It is the reminder that beneath the parent, the professional, the partner, the provider, there is still a person, a specific, irreplaceable music person with their own interior world. And when you protect that world, even for 20 minutes each morning, something, in the way you move through the rest of the day, changes. You are not depleted before you begin. You are not resentful of what the day asks of you. You bring something to it rather than merely surviving it. You have just heard 10 disciplines, and you might be thinking right now, this is too much. I cannot build 10 new habits at once. Music. I have tried that before, and it never holds. You are right, and the Stoics would agree with you completely. Marcus Aurelius did not sit down one morning and decide to transform himself entirely. He returned to the same ideas, the same practices, the same questions day after day, year after year. The meditations he left behind are not a record of a man who had arrived at wisdom. They are the record of a man who kept showing up to the work of becoming wiser, who kept failing and correcting himself and beginning again without drama. So here is what the practice actually looks like. Music. Not 10 disciplines simultaneously. One. Just one. Chosen deliberately, not randomly. Look back at what you just heard and ask yourself honestly, which of these 10 feels most foreign to me right music now? Not which one is easiest. Which one feels most distant from how I currently begin my mornings? Because that distance is information. It tells you exactly where the work is. Music. If you have never sat in silence voluntarily, start there. 5 minutes tomorrow morning, not 10. 5 before the phone, before the news, before the first conversation of the day, just 5 minutes of sitting with yourself and letting your mind settle. If you have never written an honest thought in the morning, start there. One question on a piece of paper. Music, 3 sentences. That is the entire practice for the first week. Music. If you have never defined what you will not do before a day begins, start there. One limit, one decision made in advance about who you are going to be when music, something difficult arrives. The Stoics were not interested in dramatic transformation. They were interested in something quieter music and far more durable. They were interested in the person you become through the accumulation of small, consistent, music-honest choices made over a long period of time. And here is what that kind of person looks like from the outside. They are the person in the room who is not performing, who is not trying to manage how they are perceived, who listens more than they speak, and when they speak says something worth hearing, who does not need the approval of the room to feel settled in themselves, who can absorb bad news without collapsing and receive good news without losing their footing. They are in the deepest music sense of that word the Stoics used attractive, not in the superficial sense, in the gravitational sense. People move toward them. People trust them. People feel safer and more honest in their presence. That is not a gift some people are born with. It is music built. It is built in the quiet of the morning, in the disciplines most people are not willing to music practice, in the small and unglamorous work of becoming someone whose inner life is genuinely worth living. Music, you have already lived enough of life to know that the things most worth having are never easy and never music quick. You know that the people you have respected most were not impressive because of what they had. They were impressive because of who they were, because of what they had built inside themselves over years of patient, serious work. That work is still available to you. Music. It is available tomorrow morning before anyone else is awake, in the silence before the world arrives. There is a question worth sitting with tonight before tomorrow's morning arrives. Not music. How successful have I been? Not what have I accumulated. Music, not even have I been a good person. The question the Stoics would ask is this: who have I been becoming? Because that question points in a direction. Music. It acknowledges that you are not finished, that the person you are today is not the final version, that something still remains to be built, refined, deepened, and that the building happens not in the grand moments, but in the ordinary ones. In the 60 seconds before you reach for your phone, in the 5 music minutes of silence before the noise begins, in the one honest music sentence you write when no one is watching, in the small act of moving your body when you would rather stay still. Music. In the single limit you set for yourself before the day begins. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire and still returned every morning to the same fundamental work, not because he had not yet figured it out, but because he understood that the work of becoming is never completed, that the day you stop doing it is the day you begin to drift. You are at an age now where you understand things about life that younger people are still guessing at. You know that time is not infinite. You know that comfort is not the same as meaning. You know that reputation built on performance is hollow, and that character built on practice is the only thing that genuinely lasts. The 10 disciplines in this video are not a program. They are not a system. They are simply the morning habits of people who decided at some point that their inner life was worth taking seriously. Music. That who they were when no one was watching mattered more than who they appeared to be when everyone was. That decision music made quietly and then remade every morning is what produces the kind of person others cannot easily explain but immediately recognize. The kind of person who walks into a room and changes the quality of the air in it, not through force or volume or performance, through the simple, rare, undeniable presence of someone who has done the work. Tomorrow morning you have a choice, the same choice you have always had. You can let the day happen to you, or you can happen to the day. The Stoics knew which one was worth choosing, and now so do